Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb. I am the Redneck, and you bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to convince you to do it too. And a reminder, as we always do at the start of the show, when I say go green, I mean that in a couple of ways. The first and most important way is deep ecology, not merely environmentalism, not merely conservationism, but a recognition of the interconnectedness of all of life itself. And whether you come at that knowledge or conclusion from hard science, or you come at that from a deep eco-spiritual perspective, or like me, you say those are both completely valid ways of understanding the world, I'm here to tell you that it is an objective truth. We are connected in a web of life, and whatever we do to that web, we are ultimately doing to ourselves. The second way I mean go green is Green Party. I am a proud and unapologetic member of the Green Party. Now, I do not turn this program into a promotion of the Green Party, but I do want to be clear and unequivocal that I'm a member of the Green Party because I believe that we need a people's party. We need a working class party that has the principles and values of the Green Party: deep ecology, economic democracy, racial and social justice, and a commitment to nonviolence as a way of organizing. Those four pillars of the Green Party movement, I think, are critical. And I'm going to say this. I think the predatory class and the ruling elite have created a either or, a polarization in this society where they pretend as if they are on one side or the other, but really the neoliberal Democrats and the corporate Republicans are both part and parcel of the same predatory class that are pitting us against each other. So we need to transcend the two-party system. We need to go beyond that and actually embrace our full humanity and actually create a political party that can meet our needs. And that's why on Redneck Gone Green, we bring you hosts or guests, much like Tom Neilson. And Tom Neilson, I described him, and he describes himself as a troublemaking troubadour. And I want to say, Toni Bambara famously said, quote, "The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible." And so a true artist does make things beautiful, but they should do more than that. And I, like the Redneck says, I want more beauty in the world for sure. But really the role of the artist should be not just to entertain us, but to challenge us, both to challenge us about what is, but what might be, to really touch our imagination. And I got to say, Tom Neilson does that and much more. Tom was born and raised on a family farm. He spent his early years with his hands in the soil, and it shows. I want to bring and welcome to the program Tom Neilson. Tom, how you doing?
Thank you, David.
So you heard my introduction. I didn't want to lay it on too thick, but I also want to own you and I know each other. We have crossed paths in organizing spaces. I know you to be a very accomplished musician, but also an organizer in your own right.
I have done quite a bit, from the 60s, the anti-war movement. And then I was out of the country for quite a bit, but I've worked a lot with the sanctuary movement in the 80s. I've done a lot of environment work here at home, and certainly Palestine, Latin America, Venezuela, Colombia, Cuba. All those things I've been involved with.
And what to me I really appreciated about not like your whole life's body of work, but even as you were describing them now, Tom, and that is that for you are not a single issue person at all. You see the need to restructure the whole damn thing.
It's all connected. It's, to me, it's so obvious, an oppression or an adulteration of one thing in the whole ecosystem, but whether it's in nature, whether it's a human, it's going to affect everything else. I mean, it's all it's all violence, and the more you heal, everything heals.
Tom, you inspire me to tell a quick little story of my own, and I'm going to tell on myself because as a young man, and I like to say I got my start in politics in the anti-apartheid movement at the University of Houston, right? And we weren't electing anybody, of course, but make no mistake, we were doing politics. And in that work, I remember very vividly having this kind of thought, right? That was like, man, I know that women and people of color really have it bad. And I see that. But gosh, I wish that they could just see that really class and the economic system is what's keeping us divided. And if we could just like put that rest of that behind us and just like change the class system, that we could all win. And of course, I knew better than to say that out loud, Tom, but I really felt it in my body and I thought it in my head. I had the very good fortune of having a very dear and cherished friend who I was intimately connected to. Her name was Serena. Serena was an African-American woman who I organized with. And because we were so close and trusted each other, I felt safe enough to share that perspective. And Tom, I will never forget the look on her face when I did it, because it was a mixture of sadness and anger and frustration and just everything, right? And she looked and held my gaze and she said, David, I know who you are. I know you're a good person. And I know the words that you think are coming out of your lips, but I wish you could hear the words that are coming into my ear, because all I hear you tell me is that my own lived experience actually doesn't matter. Like, has it ever occurred to you, David, that the reason that you think that class is the unifying thing for all and that we should avoid identity politics is because coming from poverty yourself is your identity? And has it ever occurred to you, and then her voice rose, has it ever occurred to you that my identity as a woman or as a Black woman is just as valid as your identity? And maybe the things that I've learned in this life is meaningful to me and that you just don't see it? And I'm getting choked up, Tom, because I'll never forget we use the words paradigm shifts. If you've ever had a paradigm shift, my friend, it goes like this. The world kind of turns around you. Like, I'll never forget the feeling that came up for me when she lovingly but fiercely called me to account. And that's when I realized, oh my God, because then I felt shame. I felt anger at a system that had so miscommunicated to me. I felt sorry for myself and for Serena because I had been so unintentionally obnoxious to her. And at that moment, Tom, I realized that's what intersectionality means. If there's anything about oppression or exploitation or domination, I've got to be against that. And I've got to be for power with love and compassion. So when you say it's all connected, brother, I feel you.
Well, trying to think where to begin here. When I left the country, well, as you said, I was born on a small dairy farm, and I grew up doing farm work, and realized halfway through my undergrad days, I'm in my sophomore year, that I felt I had more in common with Vietnamese farmers than I did with the Wall Street brokers who wanted to pay me to go kill them. And I knew I was going to leave the country after I graduated rather than go into the army if I were to get drafted. And I went to South America. And to me, Vietnam at that time was a singular event. When I left the country, I realized that we had Vietnams to some degree all around the world. Because getting to South America, suddenly I was exposed to international news, which we don't get here. And I realized just very automatically, and I had never thought of it when I was culture bound here in the States, that I had so much more in common as I had kind of projected on Vietnamese farmers with the lower classes in Colombia. Now, when I left the country, I was no longer a poor gringo as I was in this country, because just my nationality, my skin color, my education, the job that I had in Colombia elevated me class-wise, considerably to where I was here in the United States. But as I traveled, when I came back to the States, I really felt like a foreigner here. I came back in 74 and I didn't get drafted. And I felt like a foreigner. And one of the reasons was because of the information that passed as news, because everything and the national chauvinism it was always here, but I was a part of it. And now I had gotten to look at the United States from outside the States, and coming back, it was whoosh. And I left again. I went to West Africa, and I just kept going. I spent about, I don't know, half a dozen years in Africa, West and East, and worked in Europe for a bit, traveled through Asia. And, working people all around the world have so much in common. I used to tell people back in the little Methodist church where I grew up, if you took all the farmers in the world, put them in the same room, gave them a common language, that the same things would matter. Take all the women, take all the teachers, take all the everyone, and put them together, and you would have so much to talk about, so much understanding of a common language, not only linguistically but culturally, with things that concern farmers, for example.
So, Tom, I love that, and you've naturally set us up, because your music has consistently intersected with your international work and your activism. So I think a brilliant example of that is your take on the famous Smedley Butler quote, "War is a racket." So I'm going to ask Jackrabbit if he could play "War is a Racket." And folks, you're in for a treat. We're going to listen to Tom perform "War is a Racket," and then Tom and I are going to come back and talk about it. So Jackrabbit, hit it.
We start with a country, that lithium, bananas, oil, or gold. Then send in the Army, Marines, mercenaries, the Navy and Air Force till we overthrow. And who does the killing, the soldier, a sailor with gun in their hand. They follow orders and say they are willing to destroy a place that they don't understand. They come from the farms and the factories, offices, classrooms and trades to fill in the ranks. They come back broken in mind and their bodies used up by the weapons dealers and banks. And who gets the profits of 100, 1,000, 2,000%? It comes from the pockets of people you think would be recalcitrant. It goes to the makers of abominations, a mathematical manipulation. A simple corporate war calculation. Out of your paycheck they call it taxation. You pay for the wheeling and dealing and stealing. You pay for the bullets and bombs and the tanks. Napalm and nukes and lobbyists sell it. Did GE and Westinghouse ever say thanks? War is a racket, and who does the killing with missiles and mortars, grenades and guns? They come back broken in mind and their bodies used up by the Raytheon politicians.
Thank you, Tom. So y'all, I want to actually put that particular song into even a little more historic context. And that is because the phrase "war is a racket" is actually the title of a speech and then a short book or pamphlet written by General Smedley Butler, the most decorated Marine in the history of the Marine Corps, a two-time Medal of Honor recipient. He wrote or gave the speech and then wrote the book where he basically described, and I'm going to quote now General Smedley Butler, and then talk with Tom about his song. Here's Smedley Butler's words. War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to be by the majority of the people. Only a small, quote, inside group, end quote, knows what it's about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge fortunes. This is Smedley Butler says, I make Mexico, especially Tampico, safe for American oil interest in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefits of Wall Street. The record of racketeering I was involved in is long. I helped purify Nicaragua for the international banking house of the Brown brothers from 1909 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interest in 1916. In China, I helped to see that Standard Oil went its way unmolested. End quote. There is more to that, of course. It's a long book, but General Smedley Butler gave one of the most vivid, inspired, and scathing critiques of war and U.S. foreign policy as I've ever heard. And I got to tell you, Tom, your song puts it to music and poetry.
Well, thank you. Yeah, he wrote the book in 1935, and a lot of the language in that song came out of that book. Very quickly, with the forming of the national security state in 1947 and 48, they created the Grand Area Scheme, the Grand Area Committee, to essentially divide up the world into four quadrants. And because they knew that they wanted to control the world's resources, they were going to have to do it through war. And they knew they couldn't get millions or billions if people thought they were going to war with the country. And so they changed the name of the War Department to the Defense Department, because they thought we can get billions and even $1 trillion, as we've seen this last fiscal year, if people think they're being defended by our military, and that it's not just war, it's defense. And that's where we get into the Hegelian dialectic, which John Foster Dulles, he said, so the question was, how do we get all these wars in place? And he says, well, first of all, we create an enemy. We create the problem, which is, and then we make our people afraid. We get them scared to where they see military invention as a necessity, as part of security. And he goes, and we have our war. And if you look at the U.S. throughout then, our whole time, that pretty much is the MO. When you look at all these countries that we go in, and we have humanitarian interventions, which is really invasion and occupation. But that's what Smedley was writing about, and language is important. That's why I still call it the War Department, not the Defense Department, because it has nothing to do with my defense.
Hey, well, that's a fact. And of course, this is the nice thing about having a conversation with not only an artist and culture worker, but also an organizer and a historian like you. And that is because most people don't realize that what we now have been trained to talk about and describe as the, quote, Department of Defense was originally called the Department of War. And it was literally intentionally changed in order to make it more palatable to the American people.
Mm-hmm. When we were 6 years old, when I was 6 years old, and I'm sure a lot of people listen, we hid under our desks in school to be safe. And it had nothing to do with being safe, but it had everything to do with imprinting fear in our minds, a fear that became knee-jerk to the word communism, an absolute faith, and not to question, not to think for ourselves, do our own research where our government was concerned. And, when you look at the Catholic workers protesting, they would be criticized for endangering the lives of others if they didn't go underground during the mock air raid drills. That was ridiculous. It was everything. They were disobedient. That is their main crime. That's what Martin Luther King used to talk about, is that we have to be disobedient. We have to say no, and we can't be afraid. All that fear that gets locked into the 6-year-old mind plants the seeds of fear and anger and hate. And you mentioned the dominant paradigm. We have to question that. And when we do, and we've seen it really strong right now, that narrative responds and can respond very brutally, like we recently saw with the campus protests at UMass right down the road from me, and in UCLA as well.
Well, there's just so much that we could be talking about, but I want to make sure that we let your art do some of the talking as well. Mm-hmm. And it feels like this is a natural time to bring up the next song that I want to share with our audience here on Redneck Gone Green. This song is called Gaza. And the reason that I want to play it right now is literally because Tom has referenced U.S. imperialism. He has referenced the student intifada. And it just feels like this is the appropriate time to have Tom, or play a recording of Tom performing Gaza.
Everything's a target in Gaza. Mosque, shelters, and schools. Hear Bibi proclaim everything is fair game under Israeli rules. Everything's a target in Gaza, out with a group or alone. Inside a club, watching the World Cup, under the spy of a drone. Everything's a target in Gaza, homes, power station, and stores. Farms and factories, chickens and cheese and kids that used to be yours. A diet nearing starvation, turning the water to brine. Blow up hospitals, refugee camps, try to destroy Palestine. Obama and Hillary send the artillery, bomb and blockade from air, land, and sea. With all of the Senate voting, that's how self-defense ought to be. It's an open-air prison in Gaza. There's no place you can hide. Bibi says he's mowing the lawn. It's what is called genocide. Flesh at darts, white phosphorus, Palestinian blood on our hands. We foot the bill so Bibi can kill. That's always been part of the plans. Obama and Hillary send the artillery, bomb and blockade from air, land, and sea. With all of the Senate voting, that's how genocide ought to be. From partition to occupation, land stealing Zionism, apartheid the wall till they take it all, the ultimate solution. Everything's a target in Gaza.
So, Tom, even as we speak, we know that there is another assault going on in Gaza. Genocide is happening now. And of course, you reference Hillary Clinton, you reference Obama in the song, but of course,
That's 2014. That was after the 2014 invasion.
Exactly. So this is the context that I wanted to give. So, and thank you for that, Tom. So this song is a decade old, but of course, now any new choruses would have to name Joe Biden explicitly and clearly, but also the bipartisan support. Again, both Democrats and Republicans are in fierce, unequivocal agreement about U.S. empire and war as foreign policy. And I want to be really clear about the government of Israel, not Jewish people, but the government of Israel and the Israeli Defense Forces are carrying out a genocide in Gaza. There's no getting around that.
Joe Biden, when Joe and Hillary ran for the presidency back in 2016, I think this is correct that Biden is the largest, is the senator with the most AIPAC money that's come his way. And Hillary is right up there. She could be top 5. I bet she's certainly top 10 with the money that they've taken. And why is it a coincidence that both of them have been presidential candidates?
And just in case folks don't know, Tom referenced AIPAC. AIPAC. It stands for the American Israeli Public Affairs Council. It literally is a fundraising arm specifically for the Israeli government.
And these protests are scaring the U.S. government. They're scaring Tony Blinken and his whole cadre of oligarchs. You notice when they talk how often they use the word narrative, and that these protests are challenging. That's the word he used. They're challenging our narrative. That's why they have to put this down. That's why they have to, as Craig Murray says, Craig was an ambassador for England to Kazakhstan, I believe it was, and he lost his job when he was reporting on human rights violations. But he said any deviation from the point in the architecture of these neoliberal policies challenges the entire system, and it has to be eradicated, rooted out. And that's what they have to do. They can't lose to these protests, because I'm trying to think if it was Blinken who was. I said, if we can't put this down, it can make it really difficult for us to wage war. And that's why I hope that the students and all the allies, everyone, Rabbi Heschel, and when he worked with Martin Luther King, he said, the opposite of good isn't bad. The opposite of good isn't evil. The opposite of good is indifference, is when you just don't get involved. Because when you're not involved, you're complicit with the oppression that is going on. When you're silent. Go ahead.
I really appreciate you making that point, Tom, because the reality is that you can't, as Howard Zinn famously said, you can't be neutral on a moving train, right? And one of the things that I want to lift up is, even with all of the billions of dollars of propaganda to prop up that narrative, even with the bipartisan consensus of both Democrat and Republican Party leadership, even with all of that going on, I think it's worth pointing out that currently, the last I saw was somewhere around 58 to 60% of Americans disapprove of Israel's actions. Only 30% approve it, even though they are fed, and we are fed, a steady diet of attempting to denigrate the Palestinians and to lift up the Israeli government. But Americans are just not buying it.
Well, Americans, United Statesians, I would say, are probably the most uninformed people, unaware people in the world as I have traveled, because of what we are fed for news and what we are inclined to believe, because it's in the paper, it's on TV, and we don't Most people don't get further than that. Libya is a very good example of how for years Muammar Gaddafi was sold as such a bad man. But 144 tons of gold. I'm sure it was a sight to behold. Gaddafi, I'm told, was a dangerous man with his African Bank for Development plan. So Al-Qaeda and NATO fought side by side, and Hillary laughed when he died. But forgetting all the lies we were told, tell me, who got the gold? Barack wanted Gaddafi out by September. Another humanitarian hoax. You remember Cameron wanted a piece of the pie, so his RAF jets violated the sky. And Sarkozy entered the fray because a gold-backed dinar would replace CFA, and the corporate media sold. But they never said who got the gold. Take out their national water supply. Marines standing down so Stevens would die. Thousands wounded and thousands are dead from a people's uprising, the media said. Colonial looting of what's underground, all the oil and gas to be found. Was it Al-Qaeda, NATO, or CIA pilfering and looting away? I never was told who it was that got the gold. The conquest of Libya is little more than another act of imperial war. 144 tons to divide. Trilateral banks the ones to decide. NATO's war machine plunders and kills. Now Libya can't pay the bills. Ethnic cleansing of Libyan blacks. The New York Times never wrote about that. Tuaregans as slaves are sold, and I still don't know who got the gold. Yugoslavia, Venezuela, Bolivia, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Syria, Iran, Yemen, or any suitable nation. For the new American century, an invented reality as a pretext for invasion, and the perfect media narrative sold. But they never said who got the gold. Palestine is just another Libya. The media, the perfect narrative is sold, and you can't question it, or there will be reprisal. And this gets back to the fear that gets imprinted, and we have to get beyond that fear, because we have Palestines and Libyas around the world.
We do indeed. And I got to say, I want to lift up, folks, what you just heard Tom Neilson do is drop one of his famous spoken word pieces on us naturally in conversation. So I want to just thank you for that, Tom. It was beautifully done. I want to take this opportunity, because we're at the half-hour mark, to remind folks that you're listening and are watching Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb. I am the Redneck. I've gone green, and you should too. And on this conversation, on this program, if you're watching us live on Facebook or Rumble or YouTube, or if you're watching a recording on Facebook or Rumble or YouTube, or if you're listening to us on Spotify, I want to remind you, I also write weekly on Substack. We've got 4,000 subscribers and growing. I'm going to take this opportunity to say, please subscribe. If you want to get a video, choose the platform. It can be Facebook, it can be Rumble, it can be YouTube, but subscribe to the video. If you're listening to audio and you prefer podcast, subscribe and join us on our podcast. And if you prefer to read things, remember, go to Rumble. Our program is very creatively called Redneck Gone Green there too. But the reason that I and every other content creator you hear implore you to like, comment, and subscribe is because we are part of the unsanctioned conversation that Tom Neilson is talking about. You're not supposed to hear voices like Tom Neilson or David Cobb. And the only way you're going to hear it is if you actually seek it out, because the corporate media is feeding you and us and me and you and everybody a steady diet of rah-rah USA, a steady diet of white supremacy, of capitalism, of settler colonialism, of heteropatriarchy. And what we're trying to do is build an audience and a community of people who say, ya basta, enough already. It doesn't have to be this way. And with that, I want to bring back Tom Neilson into the conversation and say, Tom, so far the two tunes that we've heard from you are pretty damn somber. And I know you to be a folk musician who also uses humor, and folk music often does. And I'm going to ask you to set up the next song I know that we're about to hear.
Well, you're to blame for this, because in 2010, when the Citizens United vote happened that made corporations Homo sapiens, you started Move to Amend. And as soon as that vote happened, I went to work on corporations are human, because it must be, because I heard it on television. And that's where we came together, because we have connected with events that you've done. I've been brought in to do some music.
It's been, I got to say, folks, it is a number of times that Tom Neilson has performed art and culture work at organizing events I'm at. So I've had the great pleasure of being with Tom on both at Occupy encampments and at labor halls and Unitarian congregations across the country.
Yeah, when you moved to Amend events and that. But what's important when I think of this song, in the mid-1800s, there was a French economist named Frédéric Bastiat, and he said, when plunder becomes a way of life for a people, they create their own legal system that authorizes it and their own moral system that glorifies it. And the Citizens United vote, is like that. It makes it legal for money to have the power it has. And more recently, right now, when we look at the House just passed this bill that if you support Zionism, if you support Palestine or make any criticism of Zionism, you can lose your nonprofit status. And what they have now in place for organizations, I have no doubt that it will be used for individuals to censor those expressions of commentary for that situation as well. And when you mentioned, my short-term recall is horrible. The censorship, it's not. Oh, go ahead. I've lost my train of thought.
It's
here.
all good. The way I think about it is that the censorship is not merely that they try to tell us what to think, but what to think about. Right. Yeah. And they try to curtail our imagination space.
Well, when they get us to self-censor, and for example, in the music world, I have any one of a number of songs. If I'm not offending someone, I'm not doing my job. But there are venues that won't book me or will even cancel something when they hear a song that they don't like. And there are a lot of musicians who, I won't say a lot. There are those musicians with whom I've talked who've said they can't do what I do, which I don't understand, or they won't do what I do because they want to be liked by everybody. They want to be marketable. And whether this is self-censorship or whether this is just who they are and what they believe, and I'm not going to judge them for either one of those things, because you need to be true to who you are. But well, I guess the self-censoring that allows it all, the machine to keep going. That's
it does indeed. And I want to lift up Dave Petrovich, who is a frequent listener and contributor here on Redneck Grown Green, made a comment that I want to lift up. Tom has a doctorate in education. Music is his lesson plan. I love that. And I also want to make sure, Jack, if you've got corporations are human, I want to make sure that we play that, because this is a perfect example of using humor to educate. Hit it, Jack.
Corporations are human, I just found out. What being human is all about. Citizens United, ancestral line. Their corporate gene is different from mine. But the science is in, there's nothing to doubt. They never get cancer, gonorrhea, or gout. Encephalitis, cystitis, neuropathy, colitis, hepatitis, A, B, and C. Fibrosis, sclerosis, and heart disease. Halitosis, cirrhosis, and a pair of bad knees. They don't need a dentist or protection with sex, 'cause they live forever, it's not that complex. Corporations are human, I just found out what being human is all about. Citizens United, ancestral line. Their corporate gene is different from mine. People have faces and socks in a drawer. Corporations are faceless here and offshore. If you think corporations bought free speech before, now that they're human, they'll buy even more. Yeah, their money has free speech, to me quite a shock, 'cause I never heard my money talk. When a corporation has a colonoscopy, then I'll believe they're human like me.
I just love that song because it really does really lift up the absurdity of it all. And it does it with great humor. But that is also a very serious topic, right, Tom?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And, the thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of that program was, or that particular song was, Tom, this is like you and I knew about you, right, as a folk singer and a social change activist. How we may have even been at protests and demonstrations together in the global justice movement. So I kind of knew about you, right? But it was during the period that I was really incessantly on the road with Move to Amend around 2011 through 2014. I was on the road about half my life, and I bumped into you a lot at those events.
And Tampa, we were both on the road because I was on tour, and that was not a planned event until last minute, I think, when the same person was connected with both of us coming in and put us together.
You know what? I had forgotten that. That's a good example. Like in Tampa, Florida, that's right, because we literally we merged our events together. And it was so. Thank you for reminding me about that, because I think didn't we also bump into each other at an Occupy encampment? And
That's
I think
quite possible. I know we played in Massachusetts.
Multiple times in Massachusetts on that entire Massachusetts tour. You were in Boston, but you were also at several other stops along the way. So like you and I have done a lot of stuff together. And like that particular song, I'm curious, do you get much like response to that one? I am genuinely curious, because to me, not many people have used corporate personhood as a hook to a song.
Oh, gonorrhea gets a laugh all the time. Yeah. and the colonoscopy.
I was going to say that's my favorite line.
We do a lot of sexual playfulness to address serious issues, around gender orientation and reproductive freedom and stuff. And it because people need to laugh. And so there's, what people are hearing tonight there's not a lot of humor, although Elon, if we can do Elon, that would be good. But, when laughter increases the brain's production of endorphin, it reduces stress in the cortisol, it can reduce your blood pressure, it can reduce your heart rate. We got to laugh. And in this movement, we've got to have fun.
Yes.
And there is no successful social movement without its culture, without its art, without its music, its poetry, its theater. And we need to celebrate that, and we need as often as we can, because it's who we are. It's how we express, it's how we can be powerful and nurture and inspire and all those things.
Well, I got to tell you, you remind me of the famous quote of Emma Goldman, the great revolutionary anarchist thinker. You can't get more serious as a revolutionary than Emma Goldman. And Emma Goldman, of course, famously said, if I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution. Mm-hmm. And listen, and you called up the Elon Musk song. So folks, you're in for a treat if you're actually watching the video of this. If you're just on audio and Spotify, or if you're just listening to audio, you're going to love the song. But I got to tell you, if you're watching video, you're in for a treat. Hey, Jackrabbit, do you want to set up Elon Musk anymore, or should we just go right into it?
Well, just to say that Bruce Gagnon from the Global Net, Bruce, a longtime friend, he and I have done a lot of gigs together. He was the one that helped me with the info for Elon, and it was David Webb, who heads up Global Net now, who lives in Leeds in England, who put the video together.
Well, once again, Bruce Gagnon is a personal friend that we hold in common, so I'm not surprised at all. So, hey, Jackrabbit, let's hear Elon Musk Goes to Mars.
Oh, it's gone to Mars. Oh.
Elon Musk is gone to Mars. Get some lithium for cars. Just another cake to bake. Back to lunch that he could take. Elon wants to take control of the universal whole. Wants some better candy bars, so Elon's gone to Mars. The Mars Society says there's profitability from gold and maybe oil if there's dinosaurs in their soil. They say the rotten earth is dying and Mars is good for trying. Take along his bong cigars, Elon's gone to Mars. Detonate 10,000 nuclear bombs on 1,000 starships with no qualms. Terraform with CO2, turn the red planet green and blue. Drill and spill like Kalamazoo with his SpaceX ingenue.
Elon, off he's gone to drop the bomb.
Elon says he'll do a coup anywhere he wants to do. Like he did in Bolivia, now he's extraplanetary. Intergalactic operations for colonial corporations. I know it's a bit bizarre, but Elon's gone to Mars. Detonate 10,000 nuclear bombs on 1,000 starships with no qualms. Not to worry about radiation when there's billionaireization. Just wants to heat up outer space so he can go and own the place. Elon wants to own a place, so this place in outer space. Packing out to catch his flight, taking the red eye overnight. Jeff Bezos going to for a low-wage rendezvous, planning military bases for those Martian marketplaces, playing sci-fi in the stars. Elon's gone to Mars. What planet is Elon on? He's already there before he's gone. 6 extinctions are addressed, leaving Earthlings in distress. Planet is sending an SOS. He could have helped clean up the mess. Planning billionaire bazaars, Elon's gone to Mars. Maybe you can come along. What could possibly go wrong? Playing sci-fi in the stars, Elon's gone to Mars.
So, Tom, again, a great little ditty. And you mentioned Bruce Gagnon and the Global Net, the
Global Network,
the global
nuclear weapons in space.
Yeah. So I want you to tie that in. Why tell us the history of this song and what inspired you?
Well, let's go back to 1943, when Henry Stinson, the war secretary, called up Senator Harry Truman from Missouri who was investigating irregular activity at the Pasco weapons plant in Washington State. He told Harry to back off, and Harry did. When Harry, the night he was sworn in, Stinson called him up and said, Harry, and he said this with great satisfaction. He said, Harry, we're developing an explosive that is so powerful it can destroy the world. And that was a great thing. And where on the psychopath scale is that mentality? And so that's what we have with, and Elon is serious. All the stuff, there is a little poetic license, but he's serious that he's going to explode these nuclear bombs to make Mars livable, to heat it up. You know, we spend $3 billion, and Elon is spending your money if you pay taxes, because he gets all this funding. He gets a lot of grants from the War Department, a lot of money from them. We spend $3 billion a day on war, 125 million every hour. That's over $2 million a minute. And it doesn't include the 21 trillion that the Pentagon says they can't find from 1998 to 2015. But the kicker, and I love this one, with their first audit they ever had, they couldn't account for 25% of what they spent. And it was written off, that 25%. It was called undocumentable adjustment. So I would suggest that all of you use 25% of what you spent as undocumentable adjustment and see how well that works. But you know, we fire a $70,000 missile from a $28 million drone that costs about $3,000 an hour to fly, to kill poor people in the Middle East, maybe living on $1 a day, you know.
And let's not forget, Tom, that the person murdered may be living on $1 a day, but the American service personnel who's firing that weapon is paid below minimum wage by the time you figure it out. So make no mistake about it. Working class people are being turned on each other by this machine.
Well, yeah. I mean, that the person behind on the button has got more in common with people in other countries than he or she realizes.
And you've made that point before, and we're coming to the end of the program, Tom. So we've touched upon labor a number of different ways, but I want to make sure that we get to hear "Didn't Make the Coffee," because this is a
good one. I like this one.
This is an unapologetic labor tune. So Jackrabbit, if you've got "Didn't Make the Coffee" ready, let's hear that one.
On the 3rd of February, half a century ago, the Appalachia defenders in windy Chicago thought making coffee was a duty that women did for men, 'cause men were just too busy, their time too valuable for them. Oh, you want me for my shorthand, 60 words a minute when I type. Attention to each detail, and you never hear me gripe. I'm on time with my rival, and I stay a little late. Your everyday survival isn't coffee that I make. Oh, she didn't make the coffee, didn't make his morning brew. Doing her 9 to 5 was enough for her to do. Not in her job description, though it showed up in his diction. Getting coffee's not the way, she was working for pay. There should be no indication of coffee with dictation. will be some trouble brewing if his coffee she's a-doing. Nobody's the secretary, not to be adversary. But they ended her employment because of her annoyment. Oh, she didn't make coffee, didn't make his morning brew. Doing her 9 to 5 was enough for her to do. Not in her job description, though it showed up in his diction. Getting coffee's not the way, she was working for pay. So Chicago secretaries protested at their door with coffee grounds and instructions specifically for. And the appellate defenders brought Iris back to work, and they learned to make the coffee, these defenders of the perk. Oh, she didn't make the coffee, didn't make his morning brew. Doing her 9 to 5 was enough for her to do. Not in her job description, though it showed up in his diction. Getting coffee's not the way, she was working for her pay. Getting coffee's not the way, she was working for her pay. Oh, she didn't make the coffee.
So, Tom, I want to make sure to give you a chance for two things. One, to give us the backstory of that.
Right.
And two, I'm going to drop into the chat for folks who are following us live or otherwise watching the video. For bookings, you can contact Tom at www.tomnielsenmusic.com or tomnielsenmusic@yahoo.com. So I'm going to give you a chance to say those again slower than I do, so that everybody, I'm going to let you know up front, get a pencil or a pen and get ready. Okay. So your task, Tom, is to do two things. Give us the backstory of Didn't Make the Coffee, where that song came from, and conclude us with how folks can get in touch with you to book.
Iris Rivera was hired as a legal secretary by the Chicago Appellate Defenders. First day at work, was asked to make the coffee. She said, "That's not in my job description." They fired her. Chicago secretaries got together. They walked out of their jobs, and they assembled at the door of the Defenders building with coffee grounds and that. Anyway, Iris got her job back. And that was called the Coffee Pot Protest. It started the 9 to 5 movement, which was turned into part of SEIU, Service Employees International Union, and also the movie with Dolly Parton and Jane and Lily Tomlin, the 9 to 5 movie that people know. Shout out to Kelly Silliman, who did the backup vocals, Wiley Robbins Thorne Thompson on the mandolin, and to my union, AFM Local 1000. The bookings, tomnielsenmusic.com, Neilson, or send me an email at tomnielsenmusic@yahoo. illuminate.com. Jack and David, thank you so much. Thank you all for tuning in. Now, is there a little Q&A after this for people who can stay around?
Jackrabbit, are we set up to be able to do that this time? I just do not remember if we have set this up or not.
I did put it out, but we don't have anybody who's dialed in, so it's I feel like it's just time to sign off.
All right,
okay.
well, we'll sign off. Well, next time we have you on, and we will have you on again, I want to remind folks that we do, if you are a subscriber, you get an opportunity to come into what we laughingly call our studio audience. So if you had done so this time, you'd have been able to have a chit chat with Tom live with us. So I want to thank you, Tom, for coming on to this program. We will have you back. I want to thank Jackrabbit, the executive producer, and All About Man About Town for all the great work that Jack does to make this program go. And I want to thank you, the viewer listener of Redneck Gone Green. We literally, literally would not exist without you. This community is growing. We're up to 4,000 subscribers on Substack, and with your help, we could be 4,001. So if you are not yet subscribed on Substack, do it. If you have not yet subscribed to YouTube so you can get the videos of these great conversations, do it. If you have not actually put us on your Spotify or podcast or Audible or whatever the hell your corporate platform you're using to get your podcast, do that. I do want to also encourage you to join us next week. Remember, we do this program every week, Tuesdays, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Next week, we're going to have Margaret Kimberly on of the Black Agenda Report. And the topic, Margaret Kimberly had the opportunity to provide testimony to the United Nations Security Council last week. And we're going to actually talk about the testimony she gave about the war in Ukraine and the funding for that war. It is a program you will not want to miss. For now, I'm going to sign off and say thank you for what you do. Keep on keeping on. Peace.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Jack.